Welcome to Lessons I Learned in Law, the weekly podcast by Heriot Brown In-House Legal Recruitment. I'm Scott Brown and I'm a recovering lawyer and founder of Heriot Brown. And each week I'll be bringing you conversations with leading legal minds who've found fulfilling paths in their careers. We dive into their unique stories and the lessons that they've learned, discovering how each guest defines success in their own way. Whether it's navigating big risks or sharing pivotal moments and career successes and how they got to the place they are in their career. Our guests offer insights and experiences that you won't really find elsewhere. So open conversations, so tune in each week for fresh perspectives and real chats that highlight the diverse paths to a rewarding career in law. On this week's show, I'm coming from a new location in Switzerland, in Zurich, where I've come to meet with a couple of people to record the show today. I was joined by Nick Raymond, who is General Counsel for corporate functions and group functions at Swiss Re, which, for those of you who don't know, is one of the world's largest reinsurers. Reinsurance isn't a space or a sector that necessarily is something that we all understand. So Nick gives a really good detailed explanation as to the market and what reinsurance means. His role is a global position. He moved and relocated with a really young family almost 13 years ago to Zurich whilst he was a lawyer at Clifford Chance, and he had the opportunity to move in-house to one of his clients at Swiss Re. He now heads up a global team which focuses on M&A, asset management, capital markets, and a whole host of other things, including ESG. So some really broad work, and the type of legal team that would really suit anyone from a corporate background, and give you a real breadth of experience. So loads to digest. What really stood out was how luck's played its part in Nick's career and how he's surrounded himself with and taken advantage of opportunities, as well as the important role of mentorship and what he's got from that. So lots of interest, and let's dive in. Hi Nick, welcome to Lessons I Learned in Law.
Thank you very much. Good to be here, Scott, and looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's good to be in Zurich today. So I've given a brief introduction there, but it would be great just if you could give us an overview of your current role and tell us about that.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So currently I'm the General Counsel for the Corporate Centre and Group Functions at Swiss Re, based here across the lake in Zurich. I actually started off in London. Mm-hmm. I was at CC, Clifford Chance, and then I was working with Swiss Re, and I had this opportunity to come over here in 2011, so quite a way back, sort of post-financial crisis, and I've been here ever since. So, brilliant. You know, the kids have grown up here, and lovely place to be.
Amazing. So you worked with them. So they were a client whilst you were at CC. Is that?
Yeah, exactly. So it's always easier to have that conversation with your boss if you're going to a client, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I trained at CC. I was in London and Paris, and then I did a secondment at what was then Credit Suisse First Boston. I'm probably showing my age a bit.
Right.
Now Credit Suisse and now UBS, of course. And that's actually when I really felt like I really enjoyed the in-house aspect of being a lawyer. And I was doing a lot of work with Swiss Re at the time.
Right.
And I really liked the client group that I was working with at Swiss Re. So when the opportunity presented itself, I went for it.
Yeah. Perfect. So those not familiar with the reinsurance sector, what does, in a nutshell, what is it that Swiss Re does?
So we basically, the way I explain it to friends is we kind of insure insurers, right? So we kind of backstop. But we also do a range of different things. Funnily enough, my team doesn't actually focus on the reinsurance aspect, which you might think, oh, that's interesting. If you work for a reinsurance company, you're not a reinsurance lawyer. But actually, half of our balance sheet is assets. We have a large asset management function. We do M&A for the group. We support our treasury function, for example. We do disclosure and non-financial disclosure for the group. So we put both aspects in our team. So we cover all of the ESG. We do insurance-linked securitization in our team. So that's when we take more traditional reinsurance risk and then package it out into the capital markets. And the team also does things like weather derivatives and funky stuff like that. So it's really interesting, actually.
Yeah. Really varied. And 11 or so years, 2011, 13 years in Zurich. So this is my second time visiting. Took a walk along the lake this morning to get here. But what's your favourite thing about living in this city?
Well, my favourite thing is not actually living in the city. So I live just outside the city. And that was one of the biggest draws for me about coming to Zurich, was that I've done my time in kind of Paris and London. And I actually grew up in the countryside in Dorset in the UK, right at the bottom in the countryside. And the opportunity to do a job that I loved was also being able to get really quickly into nature. And it's just so beautiful here in Switzerland. So we live just outside Zurich, and it's just lovely, absolutely fantastic. So for me, that's kind of the biggest draw. You can get to mountains within half an hour of where we live, so it's fantastic.
Summer and winter it's
just great. And actually, I love skiing, and that was a big draw for me. And I thought, this is going to be fantastic with the skiing. And then actually I really got into hiking and mountain biking and more kind of summer sports as well in the mountains, and suddenly realized this whole new world opened up for me. So recommend it to your listeners. Come in the summer as well. It's very nice. Yeah.
We've, as a family, we've just the last 2 years been not to Switzerland. Well, we've been through Switzerland on our travels, but it's been the Alps and then the Dolomites, and just in the mountains in the summer. It's so good because it's quiet. It's a bit quieter, and fresh air. It's awesome. So very very jealous. There's not many hills or mountains in the Netherlands. So so we'll jump into lesson 1. If you could share that with us.
Yeah, so lesson 1 is ride your luck and take your opportunities.
Right.
So when I look back at my career, and I was kind of thinking about this in preparation for the podcast, I was thinking, well, anyone that says to you that they haven't been a little bit lucky with their career, the older you get in your career and the more it progresses, is probably not telling the truth 100%, right? There is an element of luck. There are lots and lots of good people. It's a very competitive profession, and the sector I work in is very competitive. I work with great people all the time. So there is this element of luck. And I think actually if you can be sort of humble enough to recognize that, that's a good stepping off point, right? But then with that comes taking your opportunities. And there is an interesting one, because for me, when I look back at my career, there's some opportunities that I've taken and grasped with both hands, and there are probably a couple of opportunities where I felt, that's a bit risky, or I didn't quite take it. But one thing I know for sure is that when I took a risk, and I pushed myself a bit out of my comfort zone, I got a tremendous amount of reward from it. So I think it's this combination of factors for me, which is really important.
Yeah. So when I guess that luck piece, where did that sort of click into place for you, and you thought there's an element of this in my career?
Well, there's the old kind of adage of being in the right place at the right time, right? And so when I moved out here in 2011, I came out here to do one role, and on the first day that I arrived in Switzerland, I still had like moving vans going left, right, and centre. My then boss rang me to say that she was moving.
Right.
She was going to an investment bank. And of course, then it's a game of Tetris because everything kind of moves around. And then I got this opportunity to head up a capital markets finance team at Swiss Re. Before it was just like one person, and I kind of got an opportunity to build that team. And from there, it was a stepping stone, right? So coming out here was post-financial crisis. Again, that was a little bit, it was not lucky for the world or indeed for Swiss Re at the time, but it was quite lucky for me in a sense because I got a lot of exposure in London. Some of my client base were moved to Zurich. It gave me an opportunity to come to Zurich. Yeah. So if you kind of look at it like this, you know, there are elements of luck, and I think you just have to recognize that. But then again, if you get the opportunity, you know, go for it.
Yeah. And was there anybody during that move and deciding to relocate? Was there how finally tipped was that? Because it's quite a big decision, right? To up sticks and move.
Yeah, that was a big decision. So I'd done it once before. So I've been in Paris actually a couple of times on and off. Had this extraordinary situation where my girlfriend at the time is now my wife. She was working for a big Swiss corporate, but based out of Paris. And we were kind of going backwards and forwards. When she was in Paris, I was in London and vice versa. It was a bit of a mess. And when you're younger and you don't have kids, you just kind of, you run with it, right? But when we moved here, we have twins, they're now 14. But when we moved here, they'd just been born, essentially. They were like 1, I think. But one of the factors was that my parents-in-law actually lived just across the border in France. Okay. So it wasn't too far to get to them. So we weren't kind of completely going away from the family unit. So it kind of worked for us from a family perspective. But it also worked professionally as well. So, you know, I'm enormously grateful to my wife because she left her job. And, you know, that was a big step for her. But it's really, really worked out for us. But, you know, I had to kind of think of it. It's family and job, right? You don't, it's not just about your job.
Complicates complicates things and has to sit right with everyone. How do you how do you yourself like rationalize that in your head and take that calculated risk, but like, do you put yourself in the worst case is I'm back in, I go back to London, or does that cross your mind when you're thinking about it, or how do you?
The going back to London piece, no, that didn't really cross my mind. It's funny because I think lawyers have a bit of a tendency to overthink things. I include myself here. I am a lawyer, right? But actually, on those sorts of decisions, I haven't really overthought it, and I think actually that's probably links to career decisions in general. That you can and over a decision, but you might have missed your opportunity by then. So, in a sense, I think you need to be prepared mentally for that opportunity to arise, because actually when these opportunities arise you have to move relatively quickly. So you kind of, in my view, sort of need to be there mentally to make that step when the opportunity arises. Nice.
And like the luck piece, like how do you, is there any steps you take to, I guess, put yourself in the position where luck bestows or falls upon you?
I don't think so. I mean, I if I knew the answer to that, I'd probably be doing something different. But I actually, you know, I think it's more of a question of giving yourself the options. Don't kind of pigeonhole yourself into thinking it's got to be this.
Right.
So I think an element of flexibility around your career is actually I would advocate for. You don't have to pre-plan everything. You can kind of roll with it a bit, and most of the time things work out, right? And if they don't, as you said before, it's not always the end of the world. You learn an awful lot through these experiences.
I think it's good to have if that's the worst case scenario and that doesn't actually look that bad, then you're like you're all right. So there's a sort of platform there, and someone that's moving, moving overseas, thinking back to however those years ago, what's the one thing you don't think about when you're relocating with a family and you move to a new place?
That's a good question. So I'm a transactional lawyer by background, right? So I when we moved over here, I turned it in my head into like a sort of like almost like executing a transaction. So I had this like spreadsheet where I was just trying to, because Rajan was like trying to manage two, twins that were about 6 months old when we started preparing. So I was kind of doing everything else. I had this big kind of checklist. I'm sure there's many things that I forgot. One of the things that, we had to sort out the car situation, and there was like, something to do with the driving license and what have you that I hadn't foreseen. So, and we don't live in Zurich, we live outside of Zurich, so that was a bit of a pain for a little bit of time. But at the time, the pound was very weak and the Swiss franc was very strong, even comparatively, even more so than today. Right. And there was stuff like paying £21 for a family chicken at the supermarket. That I hadn't planned for,
The short term hit on the pocket. And Zurich, as a working hub and business area, do most people live outside? Like, what's the
I think it's a big mix, right? So Zurich's a lovely city to live in. I mean, I've never personally lived here, but all my friends that live here love it. It's certainly a great city to work in. Public transport's fantastic here. We're very lucky at Swiss Re. We have these fantastic lunches. We have an amazing facility, cafeteria, and some client dining and things. So I think people are kind of coaxed into coming to work for that as well. So actually, it's a very livable. The whole Zurich area is extremely livable, whether you live in town or whether you live just outside. It's really practical to get around.
Nice. All right, we'll move on to lesson 2.
Lesson 2. Now you're testing me. So lesson 2 was every day is a school day.
Okay. Right.
So I chose this one for a number of reasons. So sometimes when I'm having conversations, because I mentor, people outside of my team, I mentor people in other companies occasionally, and people quite often ask me, well, okay, I could just never do what you do. And I always think to myself, well, I'm not, a nuclear scientist or a brain surgeon. So, the reality is that, yes, you can, is the short answer. We all have some element of self-doubt at some stage. Anyone that tells you otherwise is, probably lying or some extreme narcissist. So, for me, it's about sort of confronting that and working with it and sort of almost daring yourself to learn from the experience. And also when I think about careers, and that's what this podcast is about, there have been times I can think of a big job I went for internally and I didn't get it. But I actually learned a huge amount through going through that process. And it's definitely true. You learn, almost learn more from what doesn't go well than what does go well. And when I say it doesn't go well, it's just because I didn't get the job doesn't mean to say that the experience wasn't a rich one.
Yeah.
I learned a lot. Actually, the guy that got the job is one of my best friends within Swiss Re, one of my closest colleagues. We didn't know each other before that process.
Yeah.
We went through that process together. And, you know, when the next opportunity presented itself, I felt much more mentally ready, right? So, you know, it's things, it's things
I think that's
like
great
that.
advice. And yeah, like fear of failure stops people doing that. But yeah, I guess you can get a step ahead of yourself. But the like you said, the process and being part of that process is invaluable for the next thing that comes up.
Yeah.
And then your first lesson about luck, and that might not have been the right opportunity for you, and the luck that you've gathered from it, or the learnings that you've taken from the first time around help you in the next one, which might be the right thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And how often does that? So, like being part of a legal function, the size of a business like Swiss Re, those opportunities, internal moves, like how often do those come up for people? And
so, It depends. It depends on your. We go back to the first lesson that we talked about flexible thinking, right? So if you're thinking to yourself, this, you know, I want to do this, and this is what I'm going to do until I retire, then you're limiting a load of options. Now, that actually might be fine for some people, but actually you have to recognize within an internal legal function that people really enjoy being extremely expert at what they do. And that is great. And we need lawyers like that. But if you're someone that wants to experience different things, open your mind to the opportunities, because then the world looks very different, right? And I do say this to people when we have discussions around career development with team members and outside. Sometimes think a bit outside of the box. I mean, some of my really good friends and colleagues have actually gone out of law for a period of time and then come back into law. They might have gone into risk management. They might have gone into a business function. You're always learning. And it probably, you know, almost definitely, I would say, not probably, almost definitely makes you a better internal in-house counsel. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Seeing it from that perspective, and to your point on, like, you need the people who are subject matter experts, and within that, so like, as a manager, I guess you want a balance like that as well. You want people nipping your heels for the next thing, but you also want there to be a stable team of people that are doing the role and well. How does it, like you mentioned other areas within the business? Is it like underwriting and the sort of side is within Swiss Re? Is that common for lawyers to move into those types of roles?
So I wouldn't necessarily say into underwriting. I'm trying to think of lawyers that I know that within our business that moved into underwriting. Can't think of any off the top of my head, but there may be some. We certainly have within our business units, we have contracts and wording functions. So these sometimes lawyers, sometimes not lawyers. They work on the reinsurance and insurance wordings, and the in-house legal department works on some of the other legal issues that come up. And there is some level of toing and froing between those two functions. I mean, obviously we've got lawyers in our compliance function. Obviously, we've got lawyers. Our current head of audit, who used to be our head of compliance, is a qualified lawyer. One of my close colleagues who I used to work with at Clifford Chance and then at Swiss Re in London is now head of our life and health transactions group in the business. So you know, there are those kinds of opportunities, but specifically on the underwriting, I'm less sure.
Okay, and then the sort of group corporate function for could you, I guess for people that don't work in a larger organization that has that, what does that cover, and what
Okay,
how does it sit within a legal function?
Yeah, so if you think about our business, so we're a reinsurer, so the reinsurance legal function is the biggest legal function within Swiss Re, as you would expect. And then we have a team which supports the direct insurance carriers. So we have a corporate solutions business unit, and we have a legal team that supports them. And then we have a team that supports our iptiQ business and our solutions business as well. And then we have two other legal teams. One is our dispute resolution and investigations team,
Right.
and one is the corporate center and group functions legal team. So in essence, our team does everything that the other teams don't. So
Okay.
that would be my starting point. So going back to what we talked about before, so we cover M&A for the group. So we support the business unit legal teams and the business colleagues with group M&A. So we have a team that specializes in that. We have an asset management team. They also do some of the derivatives, some of the weather derivatives and things like that, because it's a shared skill set.
Right.
The insurance-linked securitization piece resides with our team, and fund work. And then the support of very important piece is the support of our internal treasury function predominantly, as well as our IR and media and comms for the disclosure. And then we support ESG is throughout our business, but the main sort of driver of ESG currently resides within our risk management function, and we support the colleagues there and the colleagues within the business doing ESG as well from our team. So it's quite a broad mandate, and that's really exciting and really fun for the colleagues that I think that work in the team, because there are opportunities to do some transactional work, but there's also some opportunities to do what we call the more sort of center of competence type topics like ESG. So we obviously have lawyers that specialize in those topics, but occasionally, we need to bring in some transactional element or something like that, and we can mix it up a bit for people.
So people moving into the business, it could really suit someone from whichever, I guess, discipline in private practice.
It's a great role for that. If you want to see across the business, it's just great, and that's one of the primary things that I love about my role. Yeah,
nice. And when did you step into management then, and how did that come around?
So that was, as I mentioned before, so around 2012. So I just arrived here, and this Tetris thing. And so I got to build a small team. Ended up being about six people, I think, from memory. And then I had this fantastic opportunity to interview for the role that I'm currently in, which was in 2017.
Right.
And I've been in that role ever since. And the team has changed a bit over time. It's changed its mandate slightly. At one stage, it was a bit bigger than it is now. And then we pushed some bits into the business to get lawyers closer to the business in a couple of areas. And, then we took on the ESG piece. And so, it's constantly changing. But,
Nice. And how big a step change was that in 2017 then? Was that a significant size of function that you were managing from where you were?
Yeah, so that so at the time I think the team was around like 45 or so lawyers. So I went from 6 to 45, which and much bigger budget to manage, and slightly different different stakeholder group. So it was a big change, but actually the lady that was in the role before had prepared me really well for that.
So I was going to ask, how do you prepare for that?
but regardless of preparation, it's still a big step, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I remember the way I got round, I had all this, just like inbox going crazy, all this kind of stuff. And I sort of almost said, right, think of it more a bit like a computer game. I mean, I'm not particularly into computer games, but I was like, well, you've got these different, incomings left, right, and center.
Yeah.
It's about prioritization. It's all the stuff that you learn when you're, a trainee or whatever. Your prioritization, tranche things up. It's still exactly the same principles, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Was that like from an operational perspective, how the work was?
Yeah, I mean, I
to-
was also super lucky because I was taking over a team that I was already a part of.
Yeah.
I had a great management team around me. I had, it was a very stable team. The person that was in the role before had been doing it for a number of years very well. So, from that perspective,
it's new. It was a known entity, but awesome. So we'll move to lesson 3. Test you again.
So lesson 3, have fun was lesson 3. The most important, in fact. Have fun.
That is definitely.
Have fun, because I think lawyers tend to sometimes take themselves a little bit seriously, and occasionally it's easy to think about the stuff that hasn't gone so well, or think about the difficult moments. And sure, that you have those moments, of course you do, and we talked about them earlier in lesson 2. They can also be a learning opportunity, but at the end of the day, remember why you got into law. Remember why you enjoy what you do. For me, I feel very privileged to lead the team of professionals that I do. But at the end of the day, we also have quite a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I think that high performing teams, there is this element of fun.
Yeah.
So yes, we work hard, but also, get out and have a drink together from time to time. We've got such a different diversity of people in our team. It is fun.
Yeah.
And I think also taking what we talked about before, about taking your, not being too rigid with your thinking, that also helps with the fun elements and stuff as well, right? So I think if you take yourself too seriously, it's not always productive.
I think being rigid or like a one-track mind, like I want to get here, then it's almost like every action you put in is trying to get there, and you're not enjoying the actions as you go. And you're looking for the outcome, and then ultimately, if you get to that outcome and it's not what you expected it to be, if you built it up in your head, then you're probably not going to be that satisfied with when you get there, and then looking for the next thing. I always sort of think it's important to take a step back, like you said, and have a bit of fun along the way, and enjoy the little bits of it. So in how did you like getting into law in the first place? Your career, how did it happen?
Oh, well, so I was hesitating between going into advertising or law.
Okay.
I have to confess that in my family, I think my cousin and I are both lawyers, and I think we're the 5th generation.
All right.
Of lawyers. So there are a few lawyers knocking about in our family history. My dad was a lawyer, but he ran his own business. So he did a very different thing with his career.
Right.
I'm enormously proud of what he achieved. I mean, he started off with one other partner, and they built a very successful law firm on the South Coast.
Cool.
So he took a different route. But so I guess to answer your question, it's a bit in our family.
Yeah.
But which probably had some sort of bearing on pushing me towards it. But I was considering other things as well.
Right. What was the crossroads with advertising and law? How did?
I've always been quite interested in sort of words and stuff like that. So law, you're interested in words in one shape or form.
Yeah.
Advertising, it's similar, but on a different plane.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually wanted to be certain that I wanted to do law. So I did law and French at uni, but afterwards I went out to Paris, and primarily because I wanted to spend some time with my then girlfriend, who's now my wife, but also, you know, I wanted to see if I really wanted to do law. So I actually did a bit of cold calling and managed to get a role as a paralegal in Clifford Chance, Paris at the time. And I did that for about around about a year.
Right.
And then I realized that actually this is something that I really wanted to do. And it also gave me a great opportunity because people had, you know, had an opportunity to have a look at me, and they said, you know, if you'd like to apply as a trainee in London or in Paris, you can go for it. So that's kind of, again, a sort of, I didn't really plan all of these things, but it sort of happened by osmosis.
But the cold calling, how did that? That's not something that everyone would do. I
sort of had like one very kind of tenuous link, but it didn't really work through someone I knew, but that didn't really work. So in the end, I just rang up, and I think it was at the time, I'm showing my age now, but I think it was the .com bubble, and they were like out of their brains busy, and they just needed some bodies to help with, you know, due diligence and whatnot that was going on. And they sort of, I think they said, well, we'll give it a chance, and then if it doesn't work out, we'll get rid of him or whatever. But I stuck with it, and you know, and ended up loving it.
But that's like networking. That's like networking 101 in terms of like seizing the opportunity or seeing the opportunity and looking for different ways to hopefully make it land in your favor. And I think that does then, like your point on luck and playing a part of it. Like, I think you're increasing your likelihood for opportunities of luck to come around by building a network and trying to harness it and take advantage of it and not being afraid to ask for something. I think it's important, but it's a bit of hustle never goes amiss.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm the greatest at hustle, but you know, but I think you have to be. It's a balance, right? Because I think if you're too in people's face, that can also go the other way for you. So it's a bit of a balance, and I think this whole notion of self-perception needs to come in a bit as well. You need to know where you are at a particular point in time. And I probably should have mentioned it in lesson 2 about every day being a school day, but also I think it comes to feedback too. Because feedback, whether it's good, bad or ugly, there's normally some truth to it, and it helps with self-perception. So I do occasionally, you know, I've had conversations with people and it's kind of clear that there's a bit of a gap in perception. And actually those are really helpful conversations to have, because they can help reset, you know, expectations. And as long as you're clear with people and you have a clear development plan, it's good to hear where people want to get to. It's good to hear people using that hustle. But then if you say, well, okay, actually, I see you a bit more here, and this is what we could do to get you to here. Then it's up to the person to go out and make it happen. And you know, I'm really proud of a number of people that I've worked with and people in my team at the moment that have kind of managed to do that.
That's great. And you touched on mentorship earlier and the importance of that, and mentoring people. Is that something that you've structured, or like internally and externally? Like how do you go about doing that?
Well, Swiss Re is really good anyway because it has our HR function, because it's a very large corporate, but our HR function does have a mentoring network and program anyway, and we have a graduate program like most large corporates. But I think mentoring, sure, it can be structured, but I think it probably has much more impact when you approach someone and you say, look, I kind of see, I think you see the world a bit similarly to me, and that would you mind giving me a little bit of your time to help me with this problem that I'm dealing with, or something of this nature. And I think actually that's a good way to approach it, because then you have that instant connection with somebody. And for me, you need that connection to be a good mentor.
Yeah.
So if you're kind of approached a bit out of the blue by someone and there doesn't seem to be any logic other than maybe they want to be able to say that you're mentoring them, that's less impactful than saying, actually, I saw how you took this decision. I'm interested to know how you reached that. I've got a similar issue. And, you know, I've had a number of mentors in my career, and they've all been very, very, very helpful at different points.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, no, I think it's an important someone to have, or a couple of people to have in your circle to get you and to bounce things off of. So I'm finishing by asking for a podcast recommendation and a book recommendation for listeners.
Now you're testing me. So podcast recommendation, I really like the Happiness Lab.
Okay.
She's a psychology professor at Yale University.
Right.
She started a podcast a few years ago now around the psychology of happiness.
Okay.
It's really interesting. It sounds probably a bit geeky and a bit scientific and dry. It's not at all. She has these fascinating guests. It's just really, really, I personally find it a really interesting listen.
Nice.
I was one the other day with Georgia Bell, the athlete that was a supremely gifted young athlete, sort of stepped away, went into a career in cyber risk,
right.
And then came back to athletics and kind of rediscovered her love of it. And, you know, it's things like, it's very mixed, but it's super interesting.
Yeah. We could all do with more. Happiness isn't going to be something someone's knocking away. And a book.
And a book. I read quite a lot of books. Actually, that would be one of my pieces of advice. That and keep lists.
Right.
So I normally read like spy novels. I read way too many spy novels. But in terms of books that I've read in the last year or so that I really enjoyed, I think Lessons in Chemistry.
Right.
Okay. I think that's a really interesting read. It's funny, but it's insightful and it's thought-provoking.
Right.
I really like Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic book.
It's a slog. It's a doorstop.
It's a bit of a doorstop. It's not as doorstoppy as some, but I think it takes quite a lot of complex ideas and makes them actually digestible.
Yeah.
So
I've dipped in and out of it. I've not got all the way through it yet, but yeah, it's got some good concepts. Nice. Well, really enjoyed chatting. Thanks for sharing your lessons and sharing information about Swiss Re. It's great to hear about the function, and really appreciate it.
Great to meet you in person. And
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Hi, thanks for listening to today's show of Lessons I Learned in Law, the podcast powered by Harriet Brown. I really hope you got some value from it. It's the real reason that I set up the podcast, to help you, our audience of in-house lawyers or people within the legal profession, to learn from others in the industry. At Harriet Brown, we're a legal recruitment business that is driven by a mission to help lawyers find fulfillment in their careers. For us, this extends well beyond the transactional aspect of helping you find a new job or finding hires for your legal team. Where we excel is bringing the best people together and the right people together, which is why community has always been at the heart of our business. We really try to add real value to our network. So to keep up to date with everything going on in our community, make sure you subscribe to Lessons I Learned in Law on your favourite podcast platform. And if you've enjoyed this episode, leave us a review or share it with your friends and colleagues on social media. That would be much appreciated. Take care.